Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the latest offering from the guys at D-Box, the Gen 5 Haptic Actuator System. A very different looking kit from all the previous versions I've tested. Gone are the big aluminum enclosures, replaced by a compact looking unit that has the power supply and controller driver circuitry directly attached to the actuator. I'm also testing the latest updates from the guys at Advanced Sim Racing on their new ASR6 Cockpit. Can the new Gen 5 haptic system still deliver the proper motion cues to allow the driver to turn consistent and well-controlled laps? Time to put these kits through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. So here is the new D-Box Generation 5 actuator system. As you can see, something looks a little different here than everything we've gotten from them to this point. Before, we had a couple of actuators with the motors and the actuator housings, right? We had a couple of cables coming off the top of the motors, going back to an aluminum box that held the power supply circuitry, the servo drive circuitry, controller circuitry, things like that. And now they've changed it. No more silver box. What we have now is this arrangement, which has the power supply in it. They call it the power supply, but I have to think that, yeah, there's some other circuitry in here, like servo drive circuitry, things like that. Now we've got everything put together in this single unit here. And yes, some people are going to like this, some people aren't, as far as aesthetics go. It's supposed to make it more compact, and so you can mount it in different places that before were a hassle with the boxes, getting those mounted. And I have to say, the boxes did take up some room, but I never really thought it was that much of a hassle to mount them. But this is just going to be mounted with a bracket. But this is going to be a little bit heavier, right, and a little bit bigger than the other actuators, I think. I can't remember what the Gen 3s were when I tested those. But this is a one-piece aluminum housing. And of course, it's been milled out with some cooling pins here and some cooling fins here. Finish is very good, by the way. Fit and finish, the usual D-Box standard. No disappointments there. And this is a two-piece shell. You can see the seam there. It goes around, all the way around this thing. So we have like these shell that we could actually pull off. And that's how they assemble it at the factory. And yeah, can't complain about that. The weight of this thing comes in, I weighed it at 9 pounds. I think it was 2.5 ounces, yeah. Or that's like 4.16 kilos, which is right in line with the documentation for specifications from D-Box themselves. So yeah, we're pretty much together on that. I think they had 4.17 kilos. Close enough, right? Not going to make a difference. Okay, when we talk about the housing down here on the bottom where the actuator is, and there's probably something, I'm not sure how much of this is the motor, but yeah, the housing obviously is where the motion is going to be created. And it has a couple of mounting holes on it. And this is very similar to their other stuff, though, I think. It has a couple of, I believe these are M6 bolt holes on either side of this for mounting purposes. Then we have the foot down here. Now, this is the non-captive foot. And you can see these two bolts on here. We can actually take this off. There is an optional captive system that you can use. So that means that we could take this off, screw on another end that goes into a plate that you can mount to something. So it's stuck there, right? So it won't move at all. And depending on your situation, you might want to get that system. But right now, we're going to just be using the regular foot here. And you can see it has that convex shape to it. And that's going to fit into one of our feet right here. And look at that a little closer in a minute. So yeah, the usual as far as that goes when it comes to this new actuator system. The numbers, let's go over the specs on this. Weight capacity is 250 pounds, or I think that's 114 kilograms. So it's right in the specs, I believe, that the Gen 3 was. Not much has changed as far as their parameters when it comes to that. We've got 1.5 inches of travel, which is, I believe, 13.1 millimeters. And we've got 100 millimeters per second as far as travel speed. So remember, this is only 1.5 inches, though. So 100 millimeters per second should be plenty when you're only moving pretty much most of the time. You're moving in the range of, like, what is half a 38, 19 millimeters or something. Because when we start this up, it's going to come up, 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters, somewhere around there, in its midpoint of travel. So it can go up or down at will, right? So yeah, moving that much, 100 millimeters per second should be fine with the speed. I don't think I've ever had a problem with the speed of a D-Box actuator as far as feeling the road surface and things like that. But we'll talk more about that once we're in testing mode. What else? Oh, we got the cables coming out. Now we got these nice strong cable gables keeping everything nice and secure. With the top one here is our data cable. It has an RJ45 connector on it. Our bottom cable is an AC power, and of course we are North America, so, well, actually this is the universal section of it, but the power cables, and we'll see that in a minute, is a North American power cable that will plug directly into this. And we do have a little ferrite, clip-on ferrite core here. And you can see they put a couple of zip ties on either side of it there, so it can't go very far, but it can spin around. So EMI mitigation on the power cable. You'll never get me saying anything bad about that when a manufacturer does that, because that's always something that you want to make sure that you don't get when you're using all these servo motors together in a motion system. And I've never had a problem with D-Box from, if my memory recalls like it should. Who knows? Let's take a look at some of the labeling here. We've got serial numbers and things like that. We've got the Haptic actuator from D-Box. Everything is haptic, by the way, in this kit. I think that's their new marketing thing. And it's been for a while. They've always talked about their haptic element that they have in their systems. But now it's actually labeled that way. So that's their big thing. Everything's haptic now. Underneath on the bottom here, we can see there is a switchable power supply. Right now it's switched to 120 volts, and I believe that's 1.5 amps. You can see that there. And if you're over in somewhere else other than North America, you would be putting it over on the 230, is it 230? Yeah, volts. And that's only 1 amp. More voltage, less amps, same power, right? All right, what else can we talk about this actuator? Oh, I think that's pretty much it. Not really much to look at here. I mean, it's something very different, obviously. I think, yeah, there was a video where they were having some kind of a event. D-Box was, I think, along with Vasario. They had one of the D-Box reps there, and they were calling this new design the Hatchet, because you can take it and hit something with it, right? I guess that works. What else can we talk about here? Let's talk about the controller box. Here's something different. We used to have just this dongle thing, right? That we plugged in one cable from the master controller box, the silver box that we used to use, into one, and then it had a USB port like this one does on the other side. But this one we're going to be plugging each individual actuator into. And when we plug them in, it has a ABCD here, which I meant to point that out while I was showing you this actuator, is the sticker up here, right? This tells you where this needs to be mounted in this system. So it's already been programmed in that this actuator should be on the left rear of your cockpit. And the other ones will have the same diagram but different dots. It looks like they took a Sharpie or something and marked it for you. So that's pre-programmed in. You want to pay attention to that when you're mounting these. Right. So then we take our RJ45, we'll plug it into the controller box. That's what they're calling this. And we'll do 4 of them. But I don't see anything in the instructions for saying whether, left rear goes into B or C or D or something like that. I'll be looking at instructions more as I go along. On the back, we have a 5-volt power supply input. That is 2 amps. And of course, we've got the USB-B. We have a little light here. Our haptic link. See, I told you. And this is a haptic bridge. Haptic is everywhere. So that light comes on, obviously, if we've got a good connection. Little flange on it. Aluminum housing. Yeah, fit and finish very good. Again, usual stuff from D-Box. We also have a power supply. Let's take a look at that. And this is what we'll be using to power our controller box, not our actuators. And we will need a connection for that. Now this is also a switching power supply. It looks like the usual 5.5 by 2.1 millimeter DC plug here. It does have a integrated ferrite core in it, molded into the cord. And this doesn't say haptic on this though. Just says switching power supply from China, pretty much. And 5 volt, 4 amp max, 20 watts. I think that's on the very bottom line there. You can see that down there. If you're interested in that kind of thing. It looks like we've got a little indicator light here. It will come on when it's getting power. What else do we get? These cables. Let's talk about the cables. First we'll talk about, well, we just have the controller box. Let's talk about these cables. So they give you an extension. This was what was in the box anyway. A USB 3 extension cable. Looks to probably be about a meter long or so, maybe even a little longer. So that's for obviously if you have a problem with getting enough reach for your controller box, right? So wherever you mount this, you might have to need an extension for it. It's kind of nice they put it in there. I don't think I'll need that, but you never know. Then we have the actual connector that will go to the controller box, and of course we have the A that will go to your computer if you're not using the extension over there. And this seems to be a nice cable, good quality. It doesn't have any gold plating on it or anything, but it does have the molded in ferrite cores for EMI mitigation. Again, you'll never hear me complain about that. All right, so we'll talk about the power cords. And this is also something a little different. I have two styles of power cords here. Let me grab two of these and put the rest up. And I got 3 of each, not 4 of each, 3 of each. But I can use them. It's not a big deal. This is about 16 inches long or so, and it's just obviously a North American power cord that has the male end, and that will go into, of course, our female end on our actuator like so. And then I will plug this into a power bar or something, right? Whatever you're going to plug it into. Then we have this guy, which is a pigtail. That's what I would call it. A split tail, something. So this, again, is a female on this end. So this would be plugged into, if I had a cord like this, a long one, which I do, which did not come with this, by the way. This is the only cord that came with it. And I would run this from a power strip or something, right? And then I would plug that into here. And that means I would have the current split and be able to power 2 things. I could power the actuator. I wouldn't be able to power 2 of these actuators because you see how short this is. And I'll be using an Advanced Sim Racing 6 Cockpit to demonstrate the D-Box system one that they sent me. And yeah, so maybe the controller box or something, but I'm sure that's what that's for, because the actuators themselves are going to be too far away from each other. So there's our cords for power. And we got our ports for USB. What else do we have here? Did we get? Oh, let's talk about the foot real quick. Again, aluminum foot. It has a nice little finish to it here. And of course, this is going to fit on the foot of the actuator. It's going to let the actuator, let's do it this way, have a little bit of freedom of movement. Again, this is the non-captive. So captive would be something we bolted down and remove this foot and put another piece on that, right? So this just gives you a little bit of room here, a little wiggle room, if you will, so nothing will bind up when the system is being used. And we'll have those obviously on the floor, and of course also keeps the wear and tear down on the actual foot that's on the bottom of our actuator. What else do we get? We got some bolts, although we didn't get brackets to mount this with. They do offer a U bracket. You can look at the Gen 3 review I did, and I had one of the U brackets that I actually had to drill out the holes in it because they don't have holes that will match a 40 series profile channel spacing. So I had to drill my own. Not that big of a deal, but I like to see them, have that for your customer if they buy it. But here's the thing. They don't sell directly from D-Box. They always sell through an implementer or a distributor, whatever you want to call them. Companies that actually build their own cockpits and then put these on them. Advanced Sim Racing is one of those, and that's why they sent me the ASR6 Cockpit to do the review with the D-Box system. So you can actually, they just want to show that you can purchase it all from them, I guess. Anyway, M6 bolts, I believe. These have a hex head with a flange on them. And I'm sure that the brackets that I'm getting from Advanced Sim Racing probably already have bolts in them, but there they are. Got little flanges on them. And of course, the pack comes with each one of the actuators. Now, each one of these actuators come in their individual boxes. So I got 4 boxes, 4 actuators. Now, Advanced Sim Racing, again, has their own brackets that they manufacture out of aluminum, and we'll be talking about those when we get to the mounting segment that will accommodate these guys and bolt right to their ASR6 Cockpit. So we'll talk about that again in detail once we get to the mounting. What else? Oh, yeah, they put these in here. I don't know if they were having problems before, but these are little locking sleeves, they call them. You can see we got thin plastic here with some ridges on it. And what you do with this is whatever cord you're using to plug in to the actuator, plug, you put this on here like this, and that, of course, increases the circumference around this plug. It's going to make it a tighter fit when you come in, this one here, and plug it in like this. Now, I've never had a problem with my plugs coming loose, but remember, this is a motion system, so this is not a bad idea. I mean, you might need this. I think for my testing, I will not use these. They give you a few of these, not just 4. They give you a few of these so you can use them for whatever, right? So I'll go ahead and put that back over here. And I think that's about, well, we get some stickers. Okay, let's show the stickers. And these are the transferable type stickers where you peel this off and the letters come with it, and then you put it on something, smooth it out, peel the plastic off, the clear plastic, and the letters will stay. So you can put this on your racing seat or your cockpit or whatever you want to put it. And that's it. That's all we get. That's all we need, really, right? So yeah, we'll just go ahead and get on to the next segment. Now let's go over the changes that Advanced Sim Racing has made to the ASR6 cockpit since the last time that I reviewed an ASR6, and it was a white powder-coated cockpit. And they've gone and done some different changes, which I think has improved the overall ease of use and just usability in general. First off, you can see this one is black, not white. Now this is what they call an infinite black, and it has some silver or grayish looking metallic throughout the finish. Now it's a very high gloss, just like the white powder coat on the other one, and it's very evenly distributed on the profiles themselves. The thickness looks all the same, pretty uniform. It's at least as good as you can get powder coat to be. There's always a little bit of orange peel, I think, in a lot of the powder coat finishes just from the nature of what it is. Anyway, they even coat it on the ends, so a very professional looking profile. It's just nice to get this out of the box when you first pull it out, because this is the only profile I've ever seen that's been powder coated, and it really changes the look and feel of the profile itself. Now also what they've changed here is the way they're building the cockpit. They have 2 spreaders in here now that connect the side profiles together. Before we had 1 back here, and then we had nothing up here. The seat rails were mounted this way, crossways, and we had an end plate, which we still have, and I'll show you that in a little bit, on the front of the cockpit that tied it all together, along with the pedal tray or pedal deck, whatever you want to call it. Once you bolted that tightly together, it kind of pulled everything together also. So it did have good structural integrity regardless. But now we have something different. They're using a 1.5 by 4.5 profile here and over here. Now they're not using the same size profile they have on the side pieces, which is a 1.5 by 6 inch. Remember, this is a 45 series profile, very similar to a 40. In fact, 40 series brackets and T-nuts actually will fit in here with no problem, and vice versa. The 45 series will fit in the 40s. So they're very close. But anyway, we got one here and we got one here. Now they've kept it this way for a reason. We still have 4 corner brackets on each piece to support everything and tie everything together, but they've made it so we can lower the seat rails themselves, which I personally really like. I'll tell you why. Before, we had the rails sitting on top. In fact, on most cockpits that we build these days, the heavy-duty premium ones that have like a 40 series, it has a 4160 on it, it'll still have a 4160 here and here, which is great for structural integrity, but it does kick up your seat rails, and that makes the seat higher. And to me, I want the seat to be able to sit as low in the cockpit without suffering any problems with structural integrity, so that I can get a good ergonomic seating position. So now we've turned the seat rails this way because now we have obviously a support we can put it on, but we've dropped it down below 1.5 inches. So now we've lowered the seating position when we're going to put our seat bracket on here and then attach our seat. Obviously, we're going to be sitting 1.5 inches lower right from the start. Unless you put some sliders in here, and that's going to maybe give you another 3/4 of an inch or so of height, depending on the sliders you buy. So I like the way that they've done this. This is going to give us a good start on dialing in that ergonomic position, which I consider to be with your heels resting on the same plane that your butt is, where it's sitting in the seat when you're addressing the pedals. And that's a great starting point, and then you can tweak from there as needed. And you probably won't have to tweak too much, do your seat angle or the rake of the seat, depending on what you want to have for your particular sitting position. What's comfortable, in other words. They've also made some changes to their front wheel mount. Now, the ASR6 that I reviewed before had a single piece of steel, big piece of stamped steel. It was thick, it was very heavy, that you mounted to the uprights. And as I recall, I don't think any problems with how that performed. No flex or anything like that in it. I'm pretty sure of that. So now what we're doing is we have a 6mm thick metal plate here. This is steel. And we have a steel plate over here. And they are being bolted to this piece of profile, a 1.5 by 3 inch profile. 2 channels, and of course you can see it's mounted flat. Now, we have some flathead bolts back here so we can raise and lower this anywhere we want to without interfering with our profile here. If we had a bolt sticking out, it wouldn't work, would it? And we have flatheads back here. I think you can see one sticking down there. And we have also this 12.5 millimeter thick aluminum plate that has slots cut into it so that it will accept any known servo motor out there currently. I'll be putting a midge on this. I don't have it tightened down yet because I don't know where I'm going to be as far as the reach on the motor, so it's kind of loose. But I did want to show you that they made a different design here. And this adapts quite well, as you might imagine. If you have a Fanatec podium or one of their direct drive wheelbases, that should fit in here with a different type of bracket, I believe. So all you have to do is change the brackets here. So again, we have to wait to see how secure this is going to be, if there's going to be any flex in it. I'll be running a 20 Newton meter midge motor on here, so that should give it a pretty good test, I think. Now we're going to look at the last change that Advanced Sim Racing has made to this cockpit. The first ASR6, the white one, as we talked about before, that had a single piece, and they still have this, by the way, single piece pedal deck. And it was a big deck that was made of steel. It was very heavy, had a lot of mass to it. When you bolted that thing tightly in the front of the cockpit, it really pulled the front of that cockpit together, along with that front plate that we bolted on the front of it also, which we also still have up here. So they didn't let that go anywhere. It's still here. This is a two-piece system where we have a heel tray, and this will come up and down depending on what you need it to do. And then, of course, we can move it back and forth. We can change the angle, whatever you want to do there. Over here, we have the more traditional looking pedal deck that we see in other cockpits as far as the design. And the reason it looks like that, other cockpits as well, because it works so well. So this front piece over here has a 1.5 by 3 inch profile. And of course, there's the exact same thing over here. But if you notice, the finish on this is different. This is a black crinkle finish. And just like the glossy finish of this Infinite Black, it's covered very well on this profile. They do a good job with that. And even down in the channels, done quite well. It looks very good. And I like the way they did that instead of going with the gloss, because that gloss, as soon as you start putting pedals on here and bolting it down and sliding them back and forth, changing things around, it's going to scratch up that nice shiny stuff that we have over here pretty quickly, I'm afraid. So yeah, I'm glad they went with this tough crinkle finish. I think that's going to be much more durable. And also, we have these 6 millimeter thick steel plates that they're using to tie this all together. And of course, we have these flanges going down here that have 4 bolts on each side that's going to tighten it all down once I have it where I need it to be. The reason they did this is so if you have an independent or individual pedal system that you use, then you just mount each individual pedal here, and then of course we could use this heel tray, bring it up, put it at whatever angle and height we needed to match it, and then there you go. I'm not going to be using this part. I'm going to be using just this because I already have a set of pedals that has an integrated heel deck in it, or heel plate, heel rest, whatever you want to call it, and I won't need to use this. But I did want to show you guys how this all works. And I like the way that they did this. We're going to have to wait, obviously, until I get everything set up and we're actually driving the cockpit to try and figure out if this is going to be stiff enough. But confidence is pretty high this is going to be a stiff unit once we bolt it together. So that is the last update that Advanced Sim Racing has done on their ASR6 Cockpit. Here is the final testing configuration I'll be using once we bolt on our D-Box Generation 5 actuators. And this is, again, the Advanced Sim Racing Cockpit, the ASR6, with the updates that they're now using on this cockpit that we discussed earlier in this video. So I bolted the seat on directly to the rails down here, as you can see. I'm using 2 bolts in the back and 2 in the front. And I do this because it's a more secure platform to press on a hard brake pedal with. A slider is more convenient, obviously, but it moves. And it has some lash in it, and I can feel that when I'm pressing on a stiff brake pedal. And of course, by design, it has to be that way or it wouldn't move. So I can just loosen these bolts, 2 in the back, 2 in the front, usually only a half a turn or so, and then slide it back and forth, and then tighten them back down. But once I tighten them back down, it's very stiff. Now, to avoid marring the finish on our nice profiles, or any profiles for that matter, I use what is known as a UHMW tape. And that stands for Ultra High Molecular Polyethylene, which is a very slick material, and you just attach it to the bottom of the seat brackets, and then you can cut out your holes that you're going to use for bolting on the bolts. And then, yeah, it's just a matter of going over and setting it on here and bolting it down. So now I can slide this around. It won't hurt or scratch my profiles. So we'll have a very secure seat now. For shifting and handbrake duties, I've mounted a little custom setup that I have, which uses a sequential shifter and a hydraulic handbrake, and I had to modify that a little bit. I made a custom mounting bracket here. Just fabricated this out of 1/4-inch aluminum, or around 6 millimeters thick, to get everything mounted up together. I used two 40 series profiles here, not 15 series, which of course 15 series is what Advanced Sim Racing uses in their cockpits. And that's a good demonstration also of how a 40 series can attach to this 15 series with no issues. I use 40 series T-nuts and 40 series brackets here on this side. And of course, there's some brackets on the other side that you can't see. Well, you might be able to see a little bit of it back there. So yeah, that's going to work fine for what we needed to do. And now I did not use their shifter mount that comes with the cockpit because this system just won't work on that. For driving duties, I'll be using this MIDGE 20 motor, and it puts out a max or peak 20 Newton meters of torque, which should be plenty to test this new design they're using for their wheel mount system. Now remember, they used to have a one-piece steel plate that they used, which actually was pretty stiff. So I'm curious to see how this is going to handle it. Now, as far as what we have everything bolted and torqued down properly now, I can kind of pull on this, and it's just like not moving at all. It's like a rock. We still have to wait, though, until we're looking at the video of actual driving footage to see just how stiff this is and if it's doing the job properly. This is the pedal system I'll be using. Now, you'll notice that if you saw the segment where I did the updates that Advanced Sim Racing is using on their ASR6 cockpits now, it had a little heel plate that we were using that was independent of the actual deck system, which is two 1.5-inch by 3-inch profiles. So my pedal set sits on its own deck, or support assembly, whatever you want to call it, and it has an integrated heel plate in it. So there really was no need for me to use the heel plate with this system. Now, I could have taken these pedals off and attached them directly to the profiles and used that independent heel plate. But yeah, why do that when the system is already ready to go and it's just 4 bolts to bolt it to this? Plus, it also demonstrates that this is capable of doing that. So instead of having to take your pedals off an existing pedal deck system, if you have that. So now what we're going to do is get our Generation 5 D-Box actuators out and see what we're going to be doing as far as a mounting solution for those. Now we're going to take a look at how we're going to mount these actuators to our ASR6 cockpit. Now, typically you do not buy D-Box products from D-Box directly. You get them from one of their distributors. Sometimes they call them implementers, so whatever the case may be. Because we're doing an update on the ASR cockpit from Advanced Sim Racing, the ASR6, they also sent me some brackets to attach these D-Box units. So, how do they work? Well, first off, they're a big thick piece of CNC aluminum, and they are 16 millimeters thick. That's about 5/8 of an inch. So pretty substantial pieces here. I have pretty high confidence that they're going to get the job done. Now, on one side, they do have their logo etched in. And it looks like some kind of a, I don't know if this is paint. This is some kind of powder coat. Maybe anodized. It's real thinnish feel to it. Not real thick like a traditional powder coat would feel. So I'm guessing this is anodized. Now, on the other side, there is no logo. And they all are done the same way. They have the logos on one side like that, and then nothing on the other side. So when you mount these, we're going to have one that's like this, showing you the logo, and the other one would just be showing you the flat side. Now, they also give you these bolts with your kit, and some T-nuts, obviously. They give you these M6 bolts that will fit into the M6 holes. Now, you can see we've got some counter bores here, and then they stop where the M6 hole is. And of course, that's so we can drop these bolts in here, and they're going to sit flush with this piece here. So I'm going to try to drop it in the deepest one, which is usually the hardest one to get it in, but there it goes. Okay. And that's how much is sticking out. These are 20 millimeter long. So there's plenty of thread here, I think, to engage the threads on the side of our actuator housings themselves on these Gen 5s. You can see there's 2 holes there. If you saw the closer look, you saw the same thing. And of course, we have 2 holes on the other side. They also give you these 25 millimeter long M8 bolts. And that's so they'll be long enough to fit through this 16 millimeter thick, or 5/8 of an inch thick plate, and engage the T-nuts that they also give you. So there's a couple of ways to get this done. I'm going to pre-mount these brackets to the actuators themselves. Then I'm going to load up the bolts and T-nuts and just kind of slide them in to the bottom of our profile to the position I want them to be in, and then I can just tighten them from the bottom. That's the idea. And I'll show you an example of that I actually did already. Over here. This is what it looks like. So we have our profile, and this is, by the way, a 40 series profile, but I'm using all the hardware, T-nuts and stuff for a 15 series profile. Just again, to show you that, yeah, all this stuff works. It's just, you don't have to worry which one you have, either 15 or 40, because it's all going to fit. Now you can see I have 2 bolts on the bottom here, and I'm about to, let me get these cables out of the way so I don't knock everything over there. So I have 2 bolts already in the profile. Now, once I have this entered into the end of the profile, I can just slide it down the length of the profile, because these are spring ball T-nuts and they slide pretty easily, usually anyway. It's not going to be anything to worry about as far as scratching anything, I don't think. Or you could just pre-insert the T-nuts and then have to get a mirror or something and you can see where the holes are and then put them in that way. But I think it's probably better just to slide them down the profile itself. At least that's how I'm going to do it. When I get it to the position that I want it to be in, then I'm going to go ahead and torque these puppies down to what I think should be the right torque. And yeah, that'll be it. Now you can see that that does take up a little bit of space on your profiles because we have this big box hanging off the back of it, right? So you do have to think about that when you're mounting things to your cockpit. If you're mounting like a shifter bracket on the outside and you have to have it pulled way back, then yeah, this could be an issue. But the thing is, as long as you have this much room on the profile, you should be able to mount this, and then you can actually mount this box part away from it. You can mount this either way. You can mount it the way you see it here, or you could flip the whole thing around and the box will be hanging off of this end. So you can do that as long as the actuator is in the right position that is on the label on the bottom here. Let's see, I'm going to show you the label. This one is right rear. See the label there? So right rear, it doesn't matter the orientation of which way you flip it though. So you're okay there. So this is actually pretty trick, I think. You know, torque this down into your housings, the M6 bolts we have in here, and then just slide it down where you need it and then go ahead and tighten everything up. Probably the easiest way, less fiddly way to get this done. And yeah, I think this is going to work out pretty well. The brackets certainly are thick enough, and of course 4 M8 bolts attaching to the profile should get it done, I would imagine. We're going to find out, aren't we? So that's what we're going to do when we come back. We're going to be back over to the ASR6 Cockpit, and these will be attached where I think I need them to be, and we'll take a look at how that went. So we have our Gen 5 actuators attached to the cockpit. No real dramas here. You do have to pay attention on the T-nut orientation when you're installing these. There can be an interference issue if you have them turned a certain way, but easy enough to get around that. Just something to be mindful of when you're putting them on here. So the way the radius works on those brackets, get down here and show you this. There is a limit to how far it can go back. So we're never going to be able to get our actuator all the way on the back of the cockpit. Does it matter? No, I would say not. But just something to be aware of when you have other things in the way maybe. The shifter, I did have to move that forward to clear the box part of our actuator assembly here. On the front, I got the actuator back as far as I could without putting on the other side of this wheelbase upright, which would not work because it would have been too close and the balance would have been off. But you can see I did get it pretty close because the brackets are mounted on the bottom part of the profile. You can slide it underneath the upright bracket. So I got these pretty close now. I don't want to get them too far apart. I could have put this actuator all the way up at the front over there, but that would minimize the amount of pitch axis I was feeling. The actuators don't move anymore, but you feel more pitch with less space between the front and rear ones because we're moving the fulcrum closer to the other one. It's hard to describe unless you're actually in one and know what I'm talking about. It does make a difference. Again, they don't move any further, but because we're not way out in the front there with it, yeah, it just gives us a little bit more pitch axis. And with 1.5 inches of travel, it doesn't hurt. So other than that, yeah, everything went on fine. We have the controller box. I just put some industrial Velcro on that because this is going to be a temporary setup. I'll be sending this back to D-Box once I'm done. And you can see I got some blinking lights over here. And that's just saying, hey, we don't have a computer connection because the computer's not up and there's no USB connection. When I powered up the power supply down there, the actuators actually made some noises, and I think they bumped a little bit, so that's always a good sign, I think. So what we have to do now is go ahead and load the configuration and controlling software that D-Box has for this system. And once we come back, we'll be on the computer taking a look at that. Now for our look inside segment. As you can see, I have one of the actuator units taken apart, not really torn apart, but I did remove the clamshell, because this is like a two-sided clamshell that fits on here. Not that hard to do, just take the bolts out and it comes right off. Now when we look inside of the clamshell, we can see that there's a big piece here, or a big sheet of this thermal material. So it's like a thermal sink, and that helps the thermal transfer of the heat from the motor that is sitting here into the aluminum casement we have here. And of course those fins are made to dissipate that heat. So I like what I'm seeing there. That looks pretty good. We have on the other side, this covers the electronics package, which is the power supply and the controller underneath, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. We have some thermal tape also here that will make contact with this bracket that we see right there. It's also holding some transistors and acting as a heat sink for those transistors at the same time. We'll look at the actuator. Now this is just a little plastic plate that goes on the bottom here between the actuator itself and the motor flange. That's what this looks like. That is there. Well, let's take a look at this actuator. You can actually pull the actuator out by the foot when it's not connected to the motor by itself. And you might be able to do it when it's connected to the motor because the motor is kind of easy to move too. But anyway, you can see this moving, and what I'm doing is pulling the piston and pulling it out. And you can see that that's how that moves. And all the way out. There it is. And you can see looks like they have a similar to the DK2 units. It's a waffle pattern or a ribbed pattern, if you will. And it looks like it's got some lube on it, maybe. Some kind of a impregnated urethane, I would imagine, to keep things nice and smooth. And you can see we have a key area here that will follow that groove that's in the piston. So it keeps it straight when it goes in and out. Very clean looking. Wouldn't expect anything less from D-Box. And of course, if I push this back in, it will spin the other way. And go all the way in. And we have some kind of a nylon coupler piece here that will interface with the end of the motor shaft. They have another coupler there. You can see it here. A nylon unit. And it has a little key way in it, a little slot to keep it from sliding around. I guess you guys can see that. And it's pretty easy to move. I mean, it's just an electric motor, right? And this is the flange of that motor right there. And again, this plastic piece fits in this way to cover that up. Or is it this way? Yeah, I think it's this way. And that'll cover up the motor before we put the actuator back on. All right, so everything looks clean, looks good so far. Now we're going to look at the power supply that comes with this. Let me kind of turn it this way, I guess. Now, one thing I did notice when I took this apart, let me put that down here where you guys can see it in the, do it this way. Here we go. I've got a close-up camera here. Anyway, the cable itself down here, it's on the edge of this circuit board. It has a little bit of an indentation in it. I think you can see that there. And that came from getting pinched on the standoff on the side of the cover, on the other side of the cover. So we've got these standoffs in this cover here that obviously we're going to screw things to, right? You can see these standoffs sitting here. So one of these came in contact with that and compressed it, which is obviously not what you want to do. And I'm sure when D-Box sees this, they'll be able to talk to the assembly process personnel and figure out how to keep that from happening in the future. But yeah, you can see it pinched it a bit there. Now how close I can get this and still have some light on it. Right in there. Which obviously is something you definitely don't want. And looks like this purple wire here got pinched in the seam where the cover joins or mates to the other cover. So again, that's something that when I put this back together, I'm going to make sure that this cable is well clear of that standoff as it goes on. So that will not happen as I put it back on. Again, it's just something that, it's a detail thing I like to point out to everyone. Now, other than that, everything looks pretty clean in here. So what we have, let me turn around this way, get this cable off to the other side. All right, so from the bottom here, go to my close-up camera again. Here's our switch. And of course, everything's solidly mounted to the circuit board. And of course, this is the switch so we can go from 115 or 120 volt to 220 or 230 in everywhere else except North America. And we have the usual suspects when we look at a power supply. We have some film resistors, not film resistors, we have film capacitors in here. We have some ceramic capacitors, very large one here. And we have a choke here. And a choke is there to reduce noise or certain signals that you do not want in the circuit. Kind of a large one there. And we have some more film capacitors back here, or one anyway, some more ceramics. And we have these very large resistors here. This looks like it could be, 10, 15 watts, pretty big. And we got another one in there, I would say about a 5 watt or maybe a 2. And then we have another choke, and I like this choke, it looks pretty cool. You don't see a choke that fashioned that way too often. I like the way that's built. But there's another choke again, doing the same thing the other choke is doing, but probably a different frequency. You can see they're different shapes. And then we have these huge capacitors back here. Now these are 400 volt, 470 microfarad units. So yeah, very large. And we have this cushy thing here. Let me turn it this way and you can see how it kind of squashes. And this is a cushion, I would imagine. So when we're putting this cover back on, that cushion is going to make contact over here. Looks like that's where it's going to make contact to me anyway. Let's see. This, yeah, somewhere along here. And it's kind of cushy. So that helps keep everything connected and keeps things from coming apart, I would imagine. Now we also have these transistors we were talking about. Not going to be easy to show you those. I think I can get you a little shot there. So we've got 3 of them. We got two of the same kind, it looks like to me, 2 size. 2 of the same size. And then we got a third one way back there. And of course, these are bolted to this piece of metal, which is going to be a heat sink, as we discussed before. And the heat sink itself on the inside here, I don't know if you can see it, but they've got some thermal paste in there. You can see the white stuff. And then again, remember the top of the lid when we put it back on also has that thermal paste that's going to make contact with this section of the heat sink so that the heat will transfer from that out to these little pins here. And these pins will help radiate that heat and keep things cool. I like this design. Very clean. Except for the cable thing, everything looks very good. And you would expect as much from D-Box. Now, I'm going to very carefully pick this up. The circuit board. This is the power circuit board. And there are some plugs down here in the back. So we have these plugs. You can see these solder pieces across the top here. So there's a plug back there. 3 of them that plug into from this board into the other board. So you have to be careful when you're taking this off. Not only that, but all the wires are soldered. So this is something that shouldn't be too difficult to do, but I'm going to go ahead and just kind of wiggle it a little bit and see if it'll come off. And there it is. I believe that's it. Yep. And this edge of the circuit board down here, where my finger is the one that gets under that cable that we saw before. So that was just pulling that away from that, and everything looks good. And of course, careful, we're not going to touch anything. And there's the inside. This would be the controller board. There it is. And again, very well sorted, as you might imagine. So no complaints there. Everything looks very clean in here, very professionally done. Again, you wouldn't expect anything less from the guys at D-Box, I would think. And yeah, so I'm going to carefully lay this back down in here, clear my cable that got pinched before, and line up my holes. And that should line up our little connector back there. And it does. It settles right back down. So now we're ready to put it all back together. Again, very clean looking as far as the assembly. I don't really have any complaints about it. It's small, compact. Took a lot of thought and design, I imagine, engineering to get all this put together the way they wanted it to be. But yeah, I think it's a very clean installation here, again, except for a little cable hazard that we got in there. But other than that, yeah, I like what I'm seeing. The first thing you're going to want to do is go to D-Box Software Downloads and download the software you need. One is called Motion Core, and there's another package called System Configurator. Now, you want to load the Motion Core first because it has the drivers and things in it, and then System Configuration. Then, once you have that done, this is what you're going to have. We'll go down and look here. It put several programs in here. We'll go take a look at first is D-Box New. That's a folder. We can drop it down. We have some adaptive gaming configuration. We've got some haptic sync and system configuration and how to use the system configurator. Motion enabler, motion settings. We'll go ahead and minimize that. And we have the control panel, which we'll be using. And we also have documentation for the USB interfaces for the 1Ps. Testing instructions, the game center where we'll spend most of our time, and some utilities down here called Motion Core Updater, Stimuli Presenter, and System Monitor. All right, so first thing we're going to use is Control Panel. Go ahead and get rid of that. I've already got one up here, so I'm going to bring that up and show you what that looks like. Control Panel, and it says default, so that's what's highlighted by default when you open this thing up. We have global level of power at 100%. We have the balance between motion and vibration at 0, so it's in the center. And we have an output buffer latency. And it has a little pop-up that will tell you what that is, better response times between game and chair response, things like that. So you can actually play with this if you don't think the response time is what you need it to be. It says 40 milliseconds is a good starting point, but it's kind of irrelevant because what we really want to do here is test our D-Box haptic bridge. Now, this is what I'm looking at. That means that the computer can see the USB connection to the controller box, what they're calling a controller box, the box that we plug all of our actuators into and then plug into the computer via USB. So you highlight that one. We can come down here and do a test. Now, if you do a test and nothing happens, there's a couple things you can check. First, we'll go over to Monitor, and I'll click on that. And it says it can see my haptic bridge. Got a little picture of the actuators, a green light up here. Kind of small, so I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see that. I can't really enlarge this because it won't let me change the size of this window. But if we click on this little picture, another box comes up, and we'll take a look at that. And that's what it looks like. So these are showing the overview. Everything is okay. We've got all green lights, and it's showing me which actuators would be bad if there were. We can go to connections, and it shows me in text that everything is green. And we can actually go and look at some details of each actuator as we're looking at it. All right, so that's what you would check, and just to see if everything, I'll go to connections first just to see if everything's green there. And usually if it's green in the overview, you're good to go as far as this right here. So it could be something else. And that means it could be your system configurator needs to be used here. Now, before I test this, I'm going to pull this up. All right, so this is the system configurator. Now, chances are you will not have to use this because your D-Box distributor has already loaded the correct configuration for the D-Box system that you ordered. Mine didn't have that. I had to, and I believe mine came directly from D-Box though, which is no big deal. You go into configuration update here, and it gives us a couple of choices down here, what we can choose. Now, I've already set mine up. And you can see up here, actual DOF configuration is roll, pitch, and heave. This is not a 6DOF system, obviously, so that's the only axes we really have. Now, it also goes for ACM count, which is 5, which I'm assuming includes the ACM that is our controller box that does the conversion for USB to serial. There's some other circuitry in there. They're calling that a control module. Down here, configuration description. All right, so what I would do here is first we look at this one. This is called PH for actuators, and that is pitch and heave. And you can see right here that, I don't know how we're going to see this, but it says D and G and then a J and M. So that represents 2 actuators together, and they're not spread out, so they're together. So all we get is pitch and heave, back and forth, and then we get up and down. Typically, I think you would get that I'm not sure what you would use that for, to be honest. And it's got a description down here. All right. So the next one is RPH, which stands for roll, pitch, and heave. You can see down here, roll, pitch, and heave. Front, right, front, left, rear, right. So now we've got what we want. We've got an actuator here, represented with a D, and that's the right front. Left front is G, left rear is J, right rear is M. And how we would plug these in. And remember, there's a little sticker on the bottom of each actuator system we got that's had a dot in it, designating or indicating where you needed to mount this. So port A would be D, and that is our right front. Port B would be G, and you can see G is here, so of course that's the left front, so forth and so on. Counterclockwise, J and M, and those go in ports C and D. So if you have this all set up, and it's showing in the configuration that it has an actual configuration in there, mine didn't, then yeah, we're good to go. Mine's 10774, which is the one down here, of course. So once I did that, and I put the configurator away, then I could hit test. And I'm going to show you guys a little B-roll of this while I'm doing it to test. And if everything's hooked up right, you should be able to just hit this. Remember, you got to have this highlighted up here, not the defaults. We should see some movement like this. And this is the haptic piece. I don't know if you guys can tell, but my voice is vibrating a little bit here. It's really like it goes from 100 hertz down to 0 hertz. And of course, then we do heave, pitch, roll, and then we go back to the haptic. You can hear this. It rattles my shifter and handbrake, so I'm holding that so it doesn't rattle so much. And then we go back into the heave, pitch, and roll functions. And then I'm going to terminate it after it finishes this one. There we go. So that means everything's working like it should, and we're good to go. So we can put the control panel away. Now what we're going to do is pull up the Game Center. And this is what we're going to see. So the Game Center, it has a lot of games in it. You can see I'm just going to scroll down here. It's got a lot of stuff. Well, all these F1s. I mean, it's just got a ton of things in here. But you know, D-Box has been around for a long time. And obviously, this is one of the mature, or more mature, or most mature applications out there as far as their controller stuff. I mean, they've been doing this a long time. They should be good at it, right? And they are. All right, so I'm going to be using iRacing. You see the status is ready. It's also found some other games, but I didn't load the codes for those. Now, if this was not ready to go, it had disabled or something like that on that, then I would go in and do a reinstall, right? So if it's disabled. Now, you're supposed to be able to go in settings, and if you can't do that and it's disabled, it won't show the settings. And then it gives you a pop-up. Let me show you what this is. So it looked like it saw an update, and it tried to go get it, but it didn't work. So what I'm going to do is, and this is our motion code settings, but I'm ready to go here, but they said there's an update. So I'm going to go ahead, what the heck? I'm going to update this motion code. Update list. Let's see if it does anything. And it gives me a little pop-up that says you want to update, and I'm going to update it. Let me grab that. It pop-ups in my other screen, so it's hard to get over there. You guys won't be able to see it. So it's going to update now. I'm going to turn that back off. It should be doing an update, and anytime it doesn't ask for you to do an update, it's probably a good idea to do that. So now my Game Center went away, so I'm going to go get it again. And go down to my D-Box, and there's my Game Center. I'm going to click on that. Should start again. There it is. And you can see now it says update available there. So I'm going to hit update down here. It's going to download the update, and it'll actually load a little screen on the right-hand side of your monitor. That was on my triple, so I'm bringing it up here so you can see it. This guy here. And it just walks you through what you should be doing to load it. And it's pretty straightforward. Once you've done one, you won't even look at this anymore. All you're going to do is just watch the installing. Now I have a box down here that says welcome to D-Box setup, and I'm going to hit next. That's why it's sitting there installing. It has it installed. It has some things in here to be checked. Start motion enabler, Windows recommended. I just go ahead and click on everything. Okay, let's get this thing done. Okay. I'll close. Now we're good. See, status is ready. Now go back to settings. And my settings box should come back up, and it does, and it loads in my triple monitor screen, so I'm bringing that up here. So this is where we're going to be doing all of our changes. Now, interesting that the code is named iRacing Motion Code. This is version 4.4 in the build. It says automatically check for updates. You should leave that on in case you get an update. You definitely want to use it. Motion profile currently is one I was using in iRacing. Go back to default. And default, you can see, is a 90% level for full effects. I'm going to put that on 100. And in the instructions, it actually tells you to do that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put that to 100. Now, that's all you can do here. What we're really going to spend a lot of time is right here. And that's under the Motion Profile Editor tab. We've got a lot of things we can edit here. I'm just going to go briefly over this, then I'll do a live session to see what I can get out of it. You can see it's got these little arrows here, like you can expand this more, but it's not doing it on my computer. Anyway, start off with general motion. Now, there are descriptions of what's going on here. Usually description says increase of +6 points will double the current front rear pitch motion intensity. A decrease of -6 will have it. So, in other words, you don't have to adjust much here to change the way things are feeling. If it only takes 6 points to actually reduce it by 50% or increase it by 50%. The acceleration reactivity. What is reactivity? Just tells you a lower value will give a smooth pitch reactivity, a higher will make it more reactive. So you have to play with these things really to get, at least I did, try to figure out what they do. And here it just talks about roll motion intensity. It keeps saying the same thing, +6, -6. Then we got vehicle banking. Now this is for pitch and roll, what typically is on pitch and roll, vehicle banking. And that's like if I'm on a bank, it leans to the right, it leans to the left. We can change the way that behaves. We have a vehicle banking recenter. Now this is interesting that it will change the vehicle banking type, allowing you to recenter the platform, even if the car's banking. So if I'm on a bank, like at Charlotte, and the cockpit's leaning to the left, because that's the way we're going, right, counterclockwise. It'll stay at the left, or I can adjust this to make it come back to the center if I'm comfortable there and it's such a long bank. So I suppose that's what you do with that. Now we'll go down to YSS. Now if you hover over this, you can see right away it says this is for 6DOF only. So these settings are only if you have a 6DOF system. We don't have one. So I'm not sure why it defaults to being on, but you can turn it off if you want, because it's not going to make a difference according to what I'm reading here. And when I did it in game, it didn't seem like it made any difference if it was on or off. And we have some advanced surge, but again, that's under the YSS stuff. Engine vibration, that's something I typically don't use much of. I kind of just turn it off because I'm really interested in the motion of the system, trying to figure out what the car is doing, not so much the engine vibrations. Unless I'm in a V8 or something, one of those loping V8s, like one of those Super V8s or an old C6R Corvette GT car, something like that, or the Cadillacs. They got a nice rumble to them. But other than that, everything's a high, kind of a buzzy motor, and I just don't use them. You can change your RPMs to a custom when it engages at high RPMs or low RPMs. Skid vibration, that's when we're skidding, it'll vibrate. Surface texture, this is when you want to pay attention to. Maybe not so much skid vibration. Oops, we skipped over suspension. This is all another one you want to play with. Surface texture, again, how much texture we have on the surface. Crash dampening. Now this is interesting that it's not on. This is what would be traditionally called a spike filter, I believe, the function of this. So if you turn this on, it says right here, let me get on this again because it's getting ready to time out. Check to enable motion damping during a crash. So if you don't have it on, you'll feel the full effects of the crash is what they're saying. And of course, if you turn it on, what it's going to do is soften the crash. And then it says how many milliseconds it's going to take to recover to the regular motion after that. And you can adjust this, longer or shorter. So again, something you have to play with, depending on the car you're in, the track you're on. Gear shift, you can turn that on or off if you want. It's up to you. I'm not a big fan of a heavy gear shift. Then again, depends on what kind of car I'm in. But usually I have that off. Brake pedal strength. And this brake stuff here, the ABS vibration, I haven't tried that yet. But I suppose the cockpit will vibrate when we have a car that has ABS brakes and we're hitting hard on the brakes. Pedal strength and engine vibration. So that's what we're going to be using when we're in the car and tuning. Okay, now the default configuration is this. I got it on default. I'm going to go ahead and reload default and see if yeah, okay, that's the default. Now, to change this, you can use these little number slots in here, up or down. We can use a slider up or down. And we could even use, if you have a mouse, you can scroll back and forth if you want to. And if you get somewhere you're lost, you can just go ahead and click this little recycle button or reset. It'll take it right back to where the default was. Interesting. Oh, why did it go to that? Hold on. Tell you what, let's go ahead and reload the default and see what happens. Let me save that. Okay. Okay, there it goes. I must have hit the wrong thing. It loaded another profile, but there it is. There's the default. So now if I change this one down to like 25 and I go back, it should take it back to 40. There we go. So it's easy to find your starting point, which is nice. The only thing is when you're scrolling up and down here, sometimes you'll be over here when you try to hit the scroll, and you'll inadvertently change one of the sliders. But again, you can go back to default, and of course, if you already had it set to something, you just have to remember what it was, or you can go back to a reload. All right, so that's going to be using, I'm going to do a short little live session just to get a feel for what the system's capable of, and we'll be doing that next. All right, so we are in iRacing. We're in a Ferrari GT3 legacy car, and we have the default configuration up, and you can see that YSS is checked here, but YSS is really for 60OF only. So we should be able to turn this off and not realize any difference in what's going on. So we're going to go ahead and just go along here, get a feel for what it's doing, get some good shift pops there. One thing I'm noticing right away is when you're shifting, there's the chassis rises up on the front, and I'm assuming that's for acceleration simulation, but it's kind of drifty. A little bit drifty for me. Even so, just the pop on the gear shift is pretty sharp. Remember, we got this thing turned all the way up on the global parameters to 100, which is what they recommend anyway in the instructions. So I'm getting a feel for what's going on here, and yeah, out of the box, there's a lot of movement, as you might imagine. Usually companies that do motion, now the rumble strips, I like to feel that a little more. The motion companies usually will torque these things up so they're moving around a lot. It's like, I call it demonstration mode or exhibition mode. But it feels good on the bumps. Actually, it feels pretty good there. But still a little bit too much motion for me, too much movement in the suspension. And what I'm going to do first is just go ahead and turn YSS off and see if there's any difference. Of course, I'm going to have to wait to get down this long straight before I can really see any difference. Yeah, the roll's the same. So once we go through turn 17 here with all the bumps, I'll be able to get a sense. It doesn't feel like there's any difference that I did that. And I wouldn't think there would be, because obviously we're not in a 6DOF system right now. We're in a 3DOF. It does give you a good sensation for skipping over the bumps in turn 17, which you do, because there's a lot of bumps there. Yeah, I can't tell any difference by turning that YSS off. So that's what I assumed would happen, and that's what's happening. But still a little bit too much. The bumps are good, and there's something that just doesn't feel right to me. And remember, all this stuff is very subjective. Okay, before we even get started here, just because I like something certainly doesn't mean that you're going to like it too. But I'm going to go in here first, and what I'm going to do is, we've got acceleration front and rear, and all these little pop-ups are telling me that if I go +6 or -6, that's 50% more or less of what I have now. What I want to do is general motion, then we've got vehicle banking, which should be based on the pitch and roll of the tarmac that we're on. So if it's a bank, then I should be hanging off to the right or left, depending on which way the bank is. If I'm going up or down a hill, the pitch should react to that. That's typically what we'll see in vehicle banking. But right now, I'm going to leave that alone. I'm just going to go with acceleration front and rear. The roll's a bit much, so I'm going to go acceleration left and right. You notice up here we don't have a reactivity slider for left and right or roll. We do have it for pitch though. Interesting. Anyway, I'm going to take this down. Let's see, 6 points is half of it, so let's go ahead and take it down 6. That would be 34, I believe. If I remember math right. All right, so I'm going to save this too, just so it takes effect. I don't think it takes effect unless you save it, because I just felt something happen when I hit save all. All right, so let's see what we got on the roll now. Looks like we got some clouds here. Yeah, it seems to be a little bit less roll to me. I'm not sure what the video is showing that I have running now. I can't really see it, obviously. The roll's still there. It just doesn't seem quite as exaggerated, maybe. And remember, what I'm after here is suspension feel. I'm not after bells and whistles, and except for rumble strips. I am a sucker for a good rumble strip feel. But yeah, other than that, I'm trying to feel the texture of the road. I'm trying to feel if I get a sense of the weight transfer like I think I should have it, depending on what I'm looking at on the video here from the game itself. And that feels pretty good, actually. Now that I've got that down to a -6. So I'll reduce it by 50%. The rumble strips that I just went over there felt not too bad. I like to see a little bit. You see, I'm getting a lot of heave here because you might see or hear my voice skipping while I'm talking to you. The bumps feel pretty good. It's not that bad. It's just a little bit too much motion on the heave. I like the texture I'm getting from the road, but I'm popping up a little bit higher than I think I should be. So we're going to take acceleration up and down, and I'm going to take that down. Might as well put that on 34 too. Go 50%. Save all. All right, let's see if that changed anything on the road texture. And we also have some other things down here, obviously engine vibration. I'm not feeling much engine vibration, but I wouldn't expect to, because this is a high revving motor. I believe this is in the 488, I think this is a V8. No, I think it's a V6. It might be a turbo V6. I can't remember now. Anyway, it's a higher revving engine. If it's a V8, it's a flat plane. It's, you know, these things rev up to 8,000 RPMs. All right, so I'm still getting good road texture. It doesn't feel like it's throwing me around quite as much on the heave axis. But remember, Sebring is a very bumpy track, and that's why I test here. That feels pretty good. Still, I'd like to see more rumble strip, but we'll mess with that in a minute. Pitch is good. Right out of the box, I think I like that. It's not too much dive. Some motion systems really put too much dive on it out of the box on the default config. It just feels unnatural. Although you certainly do get a sensation there. And again, 1.5 inches of rotation potential here on pitch axis. Now, one thing I don't like, yeah, this feels okay. One thing I don't like is when I'm shifting, I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm going to go with, I shift, but then the chassis moves after the shift like it's, again, simulating acceleration. I'm going to hit 5th here. See how it just moves back? I mean, just the whole thing just pitches back a bit much. And the gear shift, I think, first off, before we get there, I think I'm happy with everything right now, except for I like to feel a little bit more rumble strip. So let me go in there. This is pretty good. I'm actually making some difference here pretty quickly, which I like. You don't have to spend forever messing with these things, even though you can if that's what you want to do. I'm going to turn gear shift off and see if that makes a difference at all. So, and I'm going to go ahead and turn engine vibration off because I'm not feeling anything anyway. All right, skid vibration, I'm going to leave on. Suspension, motion intensity, vibration intensity on suspension. Surface texture. Okay, I'm going to just leave that alone for now. Let's go ahead and see what happens on the shift, because I'm going to deal with that first. It feels a little unnatural to me how much pitch back it gives you after the shift is made. And I know they're trying to simulate the acceleration of the motor in the car, obviously, once you shift. I'm still getting a shift bang. So we're going to go up to 5 here. Oh, actually, that's pretty good. I'm still getting a little bang when I shift up, but yeah, there's a little bang when I shift down. Yep. Okay, so we got the shift input as far as when we're hitting the gearbox, or the gearbox is making the gear change. But my question is, am I still getting that tilt back sensation? It looks like I'm not. Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's much better to me. A little bit too much roll, or rather not roll, but it was just pitching unnaturally to me. But again, that's subjective. Somebody might love that and think that's what it should feel like, and that's fine. You know, you go with what helps you control the car. At the end of the day, this is what this is all about. Yeah, it's a fun ride, but there's a lot of data here that your body can process and help you control the car better than if you didn't have, obviously, motion. You're feeling a suspended chassis underneath you now, and you want to use that information because you paid a lot of money for it to help you handle the car. Actually, I like what I have right now as far as now the shift's much better. Still a little bit intense on the road surface, the heave. And before I go up with heave up and down and well, we already messed with that, didn't we? We already took it down to 34. So we're going to go down and see skid vibration. I'm going to leave that alone. Suspension motion intensity, vibration intensity. I'm going to take, remember we do have global parameters. We do have motion and vibration balance at 0. So we can also adjust that and play with that. But I'm going to stay here before I do that and go to surface texture. I think surface texture is what I want to try to reduce. And let's go ahead and take it down to 24 because I'm going to do it 50%, save it, and then see what's going on with the texture. But on the at the same time, I'm thinking I want more rumble strip though. More rumble strips. All right, so, okay. That felt pretty good. You know, actually, I could feel right away. It's already changed that a bit more than I would want it to, I think. Let's see. Let's go over some rough stuff. Curbings. Good transitions, by the way, on that concrete patch there. And on this one. You can feel it very good. Yeah, okay. It doesn't feel as intense as it was, but maybe a little bit too much there at 50%. All right, so surface texture. All right, I'm going to take that back up a few points. Let's see, we went 24. We're going to go back up to 27. Half of what we did before. And I'm still feeling surface texture. Let's try. I already know what we've done on suspension. I'm going to go up to surface texture here and turn it up. 3 points. Save everything. Let's see what that gives me. Again, I'm trying to get these rumble strips, but I don't want more overall motion as far as heave and up and down. Okay, that feels like I might have a little more. Yeah, that feels a little bit better on the rumbles. Yeah. Okay. I'm getting happy now. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the surface texture, turning that up really helped the rumble strips. But did it do something else bad? We don't have much going on the back straight here before we get into turn 17, so I usually wait until I get into turn 17 to see what the results of that are. It feels pretty good. Now, what also D-Box systems do very well is when you're coming through you're loading up the chassis on the left-hand side coming through turn 17, that skid feel you get when you bump, you're going over the bumps. They do a good job of that. They simulate that really well. Rumble strips still a little less than what I want, but they're better than they were. And again, personal preference, right? This is all subjective. Let's see. Okay. And the whole time I'm doing this, by the way, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is the car doing what I think it should be doing based on what I'm seeing in the video feed I have and what I'm feeling at the same time, and the result of my inputs on the controls, which are the pedals, obviously, and the steering wheel. Yeah, that feels better. Yeah. Feel a little bit more realistic there to me. Well, at least my assumption of what it should feel like. Still have good transitions across the concrete patches. Not too much dive and pitch. It doesn't feel like too much anyway, and that's what's important. I'm not really watching it. I'm just going by feel here. Okay, curbing's good. Let me go off here. That feels pretty good. Not too sharp. Not too mushy. Yeah, the rumble strips are better than they were, no doubt. Still, there's... Let me go over here. That felt good. When you go over these curbings, or rather the rumble strips, they have a very sharp edge on the other side of them. Yeah, that felt pretty good on that rumble. All right, so what else are we looking for here? Crash damping is off. I'm going to turn that on, and then I'm going to crash. I'm going to slide it. It might crash when I do it, but I want to feel what the skid vibration is doing. So we're going to do that. Engine vibration's off. Let me just check the rest of this real quick. All right. Damping is on. Because if you don't have damping on, I've already crashed this without it, and it definitely gives you a little jerk there. So it's like a spike filter that most other systems use, or systems in motion. That's what they use to do the same thing. Yeah. See, what I was looking for, I don't know if you guys could see that in the video, but when I was sliding, there was like this vibration, this skipping sensation. And of course, it depends on what kind of tarmac you're on as far as what that would be like. But it gives you, and D-Box always, I think, has done a good job with that on the slides. When it's only a 3DOF system, we don't have yaw, we don't have sway. So you have to simulate one way or another, right? And when you're in a slide like that, let's go ahead and, yeah, it was like no bump at all there once I turned the crash damping on. Just nothing, which is what I want. Well, at least I want something very minimal. But when I was sliding, it's the point I was trying to make here, is I could feel a skipping simulation, or a skipping sensation that lets you know you're sliding. Even though you can see it obviously in the video if you're paying attention. And you can feel it in your steering wheel too if you have a good direct drive steering wheel. It can deliver that sensation. You know, it gets light in the steering. The normal things are happening. Yeah. Yeah, did you hear that? I don't know if you could hear that or see that, but yeah, that was a good slide sensation. So you know when you're sliding. Now, it might be disconcerting. It is a bit heavy. So you can actually adjust that, and that's what I'm going to do. So I wanted to do that and then turn it down and do another slide and see if I can keep the vibration there. It gives me the sensation, but I still want a smoother transition. So I'm going to take it down to 34. That's 50%. Go ahead and save it. And we're going to slide again here. Coming out of this turn, I forget which turn this is. It's usually the easiest slide through this turn. Well, tell you what, we'll slide on this big tarmac over here so we won't hit anything. Well, I didn't slide very good, did I? All right, let's go down here. I do like the crash damping, because without it, trust me, when you hit, you definitely get a shot, which you might want, but you know, why do that to your suspension system? I always think, you know, you pay a lot of money for this thing, why try to torture it? Even though it's supposed to be able to do that, why do it too much? Okay, now I don't feel it hardly any, so that's okay with me, but I'm going to turn it up a couple more points and save all. I think I'm about right where I want to be here with this. In fact, let me go ahead and reset the car. I think I bumped it a few times, so let's make sure I got a car that responds like I want. Looks like I got pretty cloudy here at Sebring. Everything's nice and dark. Okay. Okay, we're going to go one more slide test. Yeah. So we're in the grass, so that makes a difference. Okay. Because when you're going into the dirt, you're digging up the dirt, and you should have more when you're sliding in the dirt like that. So it really came on strong when I got into the dirt slide. Before I hit the dirt, it's a little bit there, but okay. I think that's pretty good, actually, because that was a severe slide. And it looks like when I'm sliding a little bit, I'm not getting as much on it. So that's what I want. Got a black flag. I gained some time doing that, believe it or not. That's what iRacing said. Okay. All right, so I think I've got pretty much what I want here. The rumbles are feeling good. The curbing's feeling good. I didn't have to do too much, it looks like. Going over the curves and crunching back down feels like I think it should. And again, I'm controlling the car based on the inputs that I'm getting from the suspension system, and that's what it's all about, at least to me. And I think the 1.5-inch suspension is right at the minimum for, well, maybe a little above the minimum for tarmac racing, circuit racing on this kind of surfaces, or these kind of surfaces. Although the Sebring's pretty bumpy. If you get out like at the ring, it's going to be a lot smoother, even though it does have bumpy sections in it. It's still going to be smoother overall than this, obviously. But this is a good place to test. So I like what I have now. I feel like I'm controlling the car based on what I'm feeling. And of course, the steering wheel has a lot to do with it too. You know, if you got a good direct drive steering wheel set up, then that's a big help. But does it work together is another thing, and it seems to be doing that for me. Yeah, that feels pretty good, actually. I like that. And I'm going to go down here. This is a good turn because it's a kind of a trail braking situation when you downshift here. Brake, downshift, and I'm just a little bit of brake to get me turning here. And then I go ahead around. Still a little bit light on the rumbles for me, but that's, again, personal preference. Curbing is good. Yeah. I felt like I was in a car doing it. Okay, so yeah. This was not that hard to get a decent sensation. Now, of course, this is just a short live tuning session to try to give you guys an idea what's going on here. I like getting rid of the gear shift because that's the way it rolled back on me after every shift. Just didn't feel natural at all to me. But somebody else might like that. I'm glad I got rid of that part of it, but I still have the gear shift as far as the kick. That's still there. And it's noticeable and it feels about right to me. But again, I've never been in a 488 GT3 car, so I wouldn't know, would I? Neither would anybody else, though, unless you've actually raced one of those cars or were in it and drove it in a circuit. So surface texture, we adjusted that. That felt pretty good. Suspension vibration intensity, I kind of messed with that a little bit, and that did make a difference. All this makes a difference. Turning YSS off, you might as well do that if you have a 3DOF because it didn't make any difference I could feel with it on or off, which makes sense from what they're saying here for 6DOF only. We didn't have to do too much up here. Again, if I still have overall too much and I want to turn the whole thing down a little, I wouldn't do it in here. I would go into the global parameters and turn this one down. Remember, it defaults to 90 and I have it up to 100, which I like what I'm feeling right now. You know, D-Box has been around a very long time. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Okay. See, that's what I say. If you scroll on this thing and you're over here, it moves one of these sliders. So you got to be careful with that. But again, D-Box has been around a long time. This software in their system, in their firmware, you know, it's very mature. It does a good job right out of the box. A little bit too much for some things to me, but you know, that's my idea of what I'm trying to feel what the car is doing. I don't want to go on an exhibition ride like, you know, at the circus or something. I'm just trying to use the suspension system as a suspension system to give me more input that I can get in instead of just a steering wheel. And again, D-Box does a good job at that. I really don't have any complaints. Maybe a little bit better on the rumble strips, but I can still play with that a little bit. I might be able to bring that back to my liking. It's still a little bit faint, but you have to be careful. If you start turning up too much texture, then we're back where I was before with just a little bit too much heave sharpness on the textures when I was going across the bumps in Sebring. Of course, this might change once I get over to the ring. I'm gonna do some driving on the ring for different, obviously comparison of different ways that it'll do as far as what I'm feeling. We'll also get in a rally car and do some jumps, and might even get in the Lucas trucks and see what it'll do, even though it's only 1.5 inches of travel here. And just put this D-Box Gen 5 haptic system through its paces. We're in iRacing at Sebring in the Ferrari 488 GT3, and this, of course, is my usual baseline testing setup. Now, when I'm using a suspension system, I'm out for data collection, really. I'm not looking for bells and whistles, and that's when I usually get into a system and use their default configuration right off the top of the bat. It's like too much motion, too much going on. I call it like exhibition mode. I expect that to happen, actually, so I'm ready to start turning things down and reconfiguring things right away to what I'm looking for in a motion system. It's a little bit easier for me to do these days because I've been in so many different motion systems and kind of get the hang of what I want to feel. It's just a matter of deciphering what the sliders are doing in the software. And D-Box has been around for a long time. This whole package is very mature. Their software is easy to use. It does exactly what it says it can do. And they've also got these little applets that you can use to do other things like sharing your configurations and things like that. But yeah, very mature system. They've been doing it a long time. They're good at what they do. I can't deny them that. Got a feel that I liked. It felt like I had the suspension underneath me in a race car, and it was matching the feelings I was getting in the force feedback direct drive wheel I'm using here. And of course, it also needs to match what the video is that I'm looking at in my screens. And it all came together to be pretty convincing and giving me the right data at the right time, or the right timing anyway, so that I can put in the corrections I needed to get good, consistent laps out of the system. And really, at the end of the day, to me, that's what it's all about. I don't use a lot of the bells and whistles that are available in some motion systems, unless maybe somebody's over testing something out and they want to see what it can do. But yeah, I'm really, especially in circuit racing like this on tarmac, 1.5 inches is plenty for this, I think. 1.5 inches to 2 inches does enough speed as far as 100 millimeters per second, because we're only moving 1.5 inches for like 38, 39 millimeters. So I think it has the speed there too, because again, I was able to get what I wanted to get, tune out what I didn't want, and that's what's important when it comes to a motion system. Having a good motion system actuator is one thing. Being able to tune in or tune out what you have as far as what you don't want and what you want is very important also, and I was able to do that with the D-Box system here on the circuit racing. Now we're going to move over to the rally car and get into the dirt and do some jumping and sliding around and see how the system behaves under those conditions. And we're going to go over a jump here, and you can watch this and see if you agree that the timing is right. Now the funny thing about jumps, and this is the same thing goes over with the dirt trucks too, the Lucas oil trucks when I'm doing them. When I'm actually in the suspension system and I'm running it, it feels like it's on time, even though on the screen it looks like it could be a little bit off. And I think that's because you don't see the initial reaction that you can feel in your butt when you're sitting in the chassis and it's moving. From the video observation, you don't see the timing there that you feel. And it's a hard thing to convey in video. It's really just doesn't feel the same way it looks in the video, and I always make comments on that. But anyway, yeah, 1.5 inches travel, not a whole lot for jumping, but it gets the job done. It does give you a sensation that you are doing this. And of course they have that yaw effect or sliding effect that vibrates, and you'll see this when we get into the dirt. I'll loop this a couple of times so you can watch that suspension, what it's doing back there, the bumping it starts to do when we get into the dirt. And this simulates you sliding over, chunks of dirt and grooves that are already on the track, things like that. And it does a pretty good job at that. It gives you that bumping feeling as you're sliding back and forth. Doesn't matter which way you're sliding. And it's something that you can actually see and hear in the system itself. And of course on this video you can see that vibration every time I start sliding sideways. It starts bumping and vibrating. So that gives you a good indication of what's going on. Now over the jumps, again, we can take a look here and see what we're getting when we go over the jumps. It does rotate, and I'm going to go through this a couple of times so you can see it. You can see the rotation forward, and then it lands. And again, to me, it looks pretty close here on the video, but again, it's hard to see the chassis move if you're watching the screen at the same time. It's, you know, the peripheral vision of your eyes. But yeah, I'm definitely feeling the jump like it's right on time. So that's all I can tell you, regardless of what you think you see on the video screen here. Again, it just doesn't feel the same as it looks to me every time I get into the dirt stuff. And it looks slower, or it can look like a little delayed. But when I'm in it, I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't feel delayed. It's just one of those strange things that's really just not hard, not easy to convey on video. You just have to be in the system yourself before you can really make a final decision on whether you think it's on time or not, or it's fast enough. So at 100 millimeters per second, and we've only got an inch and a half to travel to get that, then yeah, it's fast enough for that. Now it's time to get into the Lucas Oil trucks. This is the four-wheel drive Pro truck that we're jumping out here. And yeah, this is something that I recommend anybody who has a motion system give a try, even though you think you might not like it. It definitely will let you know what your system is capable of doing. And yeah, over here, even though, again, only an inch and a half of travel, it's still a lot of fun. It has good roll. It has good chatter when we're sliding sideways. And whenever I'm sliding sideways, you can watch that rear part here and see it shaking and bumping, which is, again, just like when we're in the rally car, is giving us that sensation of sliding over a rutty dirt track with, you know, clods of dirt hanging around, things like that. It's just a rough ride. You'd think it would be smooth, but it's not if you've ever been on a dirt track in anything. So yeah, here again, I'm looking for the speed to keep up with the jumps. And again, it looks like when I watch the video that it's on sometimes, but like on these big jumps, you see that impact, and it looks like I'm just behind the impact on the video. When you're sitting in the chassis, though, it just doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's meshing like it should. And I'm not sure, again, how to convey that, but you just have to be in these chassis to see these kind of things. But yeah, having a fun over here in the dirt track, as always, even, again, with a limited travel system. Of course, this is more fun the more travel you get, 4-inch, 6-inch, so forth, and so on. But yeah, this still gives you the good sensation of what the truck is doing. It has enough travel, I think, to do that, but it certainly is not up with something that has longer travel. And this is where the longer travel motion systems really start to shine when you get out into the dirt. Not so much when you're on the tarmac, like when I'm driving Ferrari around Sebring, but we're looking for different things in different situations anyway, so it really doesn't matter so much to me. But yeah, it's still a lot of fun, still sliding around with that bumping, the way the system works. I kind of like the way they do that when you get in the dirt. Not so much when I'm on like a tarmac and when you're sliding and you get the same feeling. It's like it just doesn't feel quite as natural to me as it does once you get in the dirt, because you expect that with the ruts and things going on. So now we're going to get into the silent mode, and I'll let you guys have a listen to what this system sounds like when we go over the jumps. Okay, so yeah, not that loud really, and I know that I can turn the volume up or down anywhere I want to when I'm doing this video under editing, but if you listen to the shifting sound and things like that, then you can get a good point on what it really sounds like, I think. But anyway, did well here as far as the timing and being able to tune it to where I felt I was feeling what the truck was doing and controlling the truck based on what the data my body was receiving from this motion system. So again, D-Box is meeting expectations here that I would have for D-Box system, again, being as a mature system that they have. Yeah, it just gets the job done. But again, at 1.5 inches of travel, it's really, once you get in the dirt, you do feel like you're missing something. Or in a flight simulation, obviously, longer travel systems are going to be just a little bit more convincing, I think. Final thoughts on the new D-Box Gen 5 haptic actuators and Advanced Sim Racing's ASR6 Cockpit. Advanced Sim Racing sent me the ASR6 Cockpit to show the latest updates they have made to that chassis. I already did a build video review on the original ASR6 Cockpit a while back, and is in my Cockpits playlist. Firstly, they have a new powder coat color option called Infinite Black. It has a metallic metal flake embedded in the coat, which gives it a glimmer effect at different light angles. The coating is very smooth, and I could find no defects in it. ASR has added another piece of profile to the spreader roll similar to other profile cockpits out there. The profiles are 1.5 inch by 4.5 inch 3-channel units. This lets the top of them sit lower than the top of the 1.5 inch by 6 inch profiles used for the base sides. This allows you to mount the 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch seat rails flush with the tops of the side profiles, essentially lowering the seat mount height by 1.5 inches, which makes it easier to get a proper GT-style driving position. The new front mount modular system was tested to be very stiff, with no noticeable flex during driving using a 20 Nm midge motor system. The new pedal deck is also an improvement over the still available solid steel plate deck with pre-drilled holes. This new deck also felt very solid with no flex seen. Now on to the latest D-Box offering, the Gen 5 haptic actuator system. This new design has the power supply and controller board attached directly to the actuator assembly. No more separate controller boxes of the previous systems. This makes the system easier to install. However, it does take up more space on the mounting surface, something you need to plan for. I used Advanced Sim Racing's custom mounting brackets to get the Gen 5s mounted to the ASR6 Cockpit. A solid design which caused me no concern about potential flex once installed. Once installed, all you need to do is plug the actuators into a small 4-port controller box and route the power cables, and you're done. In my look inside segment, I did find a pinched cable resulting from the assembly process, which D-Box should be aware of and be working to avoid in the future. The electronic layout was very professional looking and well thought out in design, using good quality components in the circuit board's construction. D-Box uses a corrugated looking sleeve in the actuator housing to guide and lubricate the actuator piston, which should provide a good life cycle, I think. The software suite that D-Box uses is easy to use, and I was able to find a setup that allowed me to turn consistent laps based on the information I could pull from the motion generated. At 100 millimeters per second, the actuators, which have a 1.5 inch or 38.1 millimeter stroke, felt on time with what I was feeling in the direct drive wheel system I was using and what I was seeing on my monitors. Again, not surprised by the performance, as D-Box has been doing this for a very long time. I did test the system using Rally and Lucas Oil trucks for dirt impressions. Here again, I found the same performance as during the circuit racing sessions. The 1.5 inch stroke did show its limitations here, but the speed and feel were still very good. Overall, not much to criticize with the new Gen 5 haptic actuator kit. Just gets the job done with minimal fuss. At $7,500 for a 4-actuator kit with 1.5 inches of travel, they will be competing with other motion systems out there that do offer more travel for the same or less money. Still, D-Box is a true turnkey system, and one of the most refined motion systems available. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.